I spent the night with a hot stranger, then realized he was my ex's ghost. The first thing I registered was the heat of someone's skin against mine. My back slammed into the wall, fingers digging into my ribs, hands pushing under my shirt, burning a trail over my skin. Oh yeah, this was happening. I was drunk, pissed, wasted, 3 bottles deep kind of drunk, but not so far gone that I didn't know exactly what was going on. The only mystery was who was currently trying to eat my face off. Not that I cared. My own hands moved with zero hesitation, sliding under a leather jacket, gripping firm muscle, yanking fabric. There was no finesse, no slow buildup, just frantic, messy, greedy movements. My expensive dress shirt got yanked open, buttons popping off and scattering like confetti. But that didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting closer, touching more, feeling everything. I shoved my knee between his legs and he groaned against my mouth. Hot, rough, familiar. Wait, familiar? Didn't matter. I was out tonight to get wasted and get laid, and so far, I was 2 for 2. We crashed through my front door, bumping into furniture, knocking over what was probably an expensive lamp. My brain barely processed the destruction because my focus was locked on more important things, like getting him out of that leather jacket. I tugged, he shrugged it off, and I immediately went for a zipper. The second I got it down, I grinned against his mouth. Bingo. He laughed, low, rough, before dragging me toward the couch. We collapsed onto it, tangled limbs, teeth, hands, everything. I barely got a second to breathe before I felt his mouth against my throat, biting, sucking, leaving heat in his wake. Okay, all right, game over. I was done for. I dropped to my knees, and that was when everything really got interesting. The next morning, pain. That was the first thing I registered. A full-blown industrial-grade hangover. But this wasn't my first. I didn't bother opening my eyes. Just reached for my bedside drawer, fumbled for the painkillers, popped one and exhaled through the pounding in my skull. Weekends were always a blur. Last night, no exception. I sat up, pulling on my robe, when something caught my eye. Clothes. Not mine. Leather jacket, ripped jeans, heavy boots. Still here. Cute, but also inconvenient. I didn't do attachments. I did whiskey, bad decisions, and clean getaways. Another poor Spaniard was about to get his heart broken. I followed the scent of coffee to the kitchen, ready to drop my well-rehearsed "this was fun but" speech. And then I saw him. Shirtless, boxers hanging low, dark hair skimming his broad, tattooed back, an intricate maze of ink that made my breath catch. Not my usual type, but I wasn't about to deny facts. That was a damn nice bag. Morning, I muttered. He took his time finishing his coffee before rinsing the cup. Buenos dias, he said, voice thick with a Spanish accent. Sorry for crashing here. I was heading out, but he gestured to the coffee pot. Needed a pick-me-up. My head is killing me. I leaned against the kitchen island, smirking. I don't mind. Could use some caffeine myself. He poured another cup, back still turned. Made enough for 2. How thoughtful. Finally he turned, smirking like we were old friends. It's the least I could do. Then he brushed past me, heading upstairs. And that's when it hit. A gut punch. A shock to my system so strong I nearly dropped my cup. No. There was no way. I stared at the coffee, hands rattling until the scalding liquid spilled over and straight into my lap. Shit! I jolted, stumbling to the sink, splashing cold water on my face again and again. I had to still be asleep. This can't be happening, I muttered. There's no way it's him. Footsteps. I turned just as he came back down, now dressed, leather jacket, dark jeans, hair neatly tied back. He threw a casual wave. See you around. And then I really saw his face. My stomach dropped. My throat locked up. I knew that face. It really was him. Forsythe? He frowned. What? I swallowed hard. Are you Forsythe? His confusion deepened. My name is Julio. Julio? No, that wasn't possible. He checked his watch and sighed. I really gotta run. You should get some rest, man. You look like you've seen a ghost. With that, he slipped out the door and hopped on his bike. Flashback, 2 years ago. Forsythe Laurent was it for me. We'd been together since forever. One of those disgustingly cute childhood sweetheart stories people roll their eyes at, but secretly wish they had. High school? Together. College? Together. My residency? And we were still together. It wasn't even a question if we were gonna get married, just when. So when he proposed, yes, he proposed. I said yes before he even finished the question. No grand gestures, no over-the-top spectacle. Just Forsythe, smiling at me with those soft green eyes, holding out a ring like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I think I cried. Okay, I definitely cried. Forsythe was nothing like Julio. He wasn't broad or tattooed, didn't have long hair or a beard. He was neat, refined, always in crisp shirts and perfectly pressed trousers, with that calming voice and warm, easy smile. He was steady, safe. He was home. And then one night, home disappeared. I was on the night shift at the hospital when the ER doors exploded open. The medics came barreling in with a gurney, shouting vitals. Male, early 30s. I barely looked up. Just another trauma case. Another night. Another... And then I heard the name. Forsythe Laurent, 31, severe blunt force trauma. My heart stopped. No. No. I was moving before I even processed it, shoving past nurses, grabbing the gurney rails. Forsythe. He was barely conscious, his blonde hair soaked in blood, his perfect white shirt shredded and stained red. His lips moved. My name. Bruce, he rasped. I'm here, I choked, gripping his hand. I'm right here, baby. You're gonna be okay. Then someone grabbed my shoulders. Dr. Calloway, you can't. No! I fought them, fought the hands pulling me away. Let me stay! But I knew the rules. I wasn't allowed to operate on him. I wasn't allowed to do anything. So I stood there, helpless, and I watched as they wheeled my fiancé away. 3 grueling hours later, I got the memo. Time of death, 3:42 a.m. Forsythe was gone. End of flashback. The present day, 1 month later. Look, I'll be honest. The next month, not my proudest. The first few weeks were pure, undiluted panic. All the pain from 2 years ago was back. And I mean full-blown panic attacks. I had seen Forsythe in the flesh. Once I finally managed to wrap my mind around it, read, after exhausting my entire stash of anxiety meds and staring at my ceiling like a lunatic for nights on end, I did what any reasonable person in my situation would do. I took an extended leave from work. Then, I started snooping. Listen, I had moved to get away from him. I left behind everything. The job, the friends, the apartment with the ugly but charming kitchen tiles, because every inch of it was drenched in memories of him. And now? Now this? No way, not happening. So I did what any guy losing his grip on reality would do. I staked out the bar where I met Julio. And that's how I learned a couple of things. Julio? A local legend. Apparently he was part of the town's native biker gang. Not the sketchy back alley, we deal in shady business kind. More like the neighborhood watch, but with leather jackets and zero respect for traffic laws kind. They looked out for their own. The problem was, Julio was damn hard to find. 2 weeks. 2 whole weeks of frequenting that bar, and not once did I run into him again. And then, well, then it all went to shit. The following Friday, I went back to the bar on a Friday night, like I had every other damn night for the past 2 weeks. Ordered a drink, blended in, and kept my ears open. Nothing new. And then, like clockwork, I started making my rounds, striking up casual conversations, working my way through the regulars, throwing in a well-placed, "Hey, you guys seen Julio lately?" Like I wasn't out here on some Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated type of shit. It was going well, until it wasn't. 1 second, I was chatting up a guy with way too many missing teeth. The next, 2 rough-looking dudes grabbed me, one on each arm, and before I could even process what was happening, I was dragged toward the back. Now, in my experience, getting yanked into a dimly lit back room by 2 guys built like refrigerators usually meant something bad. Like, hey, let's have a friendly chat with our fists, kind of bad. And then I saw him, Julio, sitting at a table, legs spread like he owned the damn world, fingers drumming against the wood. He looked about as unimpressed as a guy could be. The moment my eyes landed on him, my brain short-circuited. Because it wasn't just Julio sitting there. It was Forsythe. I felt it, all over again. That gut punch of familiarity. The impossible resemblance. My throat dried up. The 2 guys who had brought me in left immediately, shutting the door behind them. Julio exhaled sharply through his nose, like he was already out of patience. "All right," he said, voice thick with his Spanish accent. "You want to tell me why the hell you've been asking around about me?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because honestly, what the hell was I supposed to say? Julio's jaw tightened. "Mierda," he muttered, shaking his head. "This is not happening." I was still reeling, staring at him like I'd just seen a ghost. Which, technically, I had. Julio's irritation turned into something sharper. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You a cop?" I blinked. "What? You wearing a wire?" "What? No!" Before I could get another word out, he moved. Fast. Hands grabbed my sides, my arms, patting down my jacket, my waistband. I stiffened as he pressed against me, searching for something I definitely didn't have. And that's when it happened. He was so close. I could see the exact shade of green in his eyes. The same green I had spent years memorizing. And suddenly, my chest ached. I didn't even realize I was crying until the first tear hit my cheek. "Forsythe," I whispered, barely audible. Julio froze. Then, boom, he snapped. 1 second he was in my space, hands on me. The next, he grabbed me by my collar and all but dragged me out of the bar, past the stunned patrons, shoving the door open with enough force to make heads turn. The second we hit the alley, he threw me back, eyes blazing. "I'm not Forsythe," he spat, his voice razor-sharp with frustration. "Stop following me. Stop looking at me like you know me." His breathing was ragged, fists clenched at his sides. "I don't know who the hell Forsythe is," he bit out, "and I don't care." He stepped closer, towering over me. "You need to move the fuck on." And then, he was gone. 1 week later, I tried to be normal about it. For a whole 3 days, I really tried. Tried to eat, tried to sleep, tried not to think about the fact that I had seen Forsythe, heard him, touched him, that he had grabbed me by the collar, looked at me, and told me to move the fuck on. Tried not to remember how his voice wasn't exactly the same, but close enough that my brain kept replaying it on a loop, like some sick joke. But by the fourth day, yeah, that shit wasn't working. So I went back to the one thing that had sort of worked the first time I lost him. Reckless distraction. I threw myself back into work, or at least pretended to. Wrote reports, did my rounds at the hospital, answered emails I had ignored for weeks. I even made it through a full conversation with my boss without looking like I was on the verge of an existential crisis. And at night, I did what I did best. Numbed the hell out of my brain. Bars, drinks, a little too much of both. Then, of course, there were the flings. The same routine I had perfected after Forsythe died. Find someone attractive, let them be a distraction for a night. Wake up, say thanks for the fun, and move on. It wasn't about fun. It wasn't about connection. It was about not thinking. Not thinking about Forsythe. Not thinking about Julio. Not thinking about how, for some reason, they were the same damn face. And if I could just keep my brain too busy, too wasted, or too preoccupied with the next warm body, maybe, just maybe, I could forget the last month ever happened. 6 months later, I had hit my stride. It took me a while, 6 whole months of not thinking, but I was finally back in control. My job was stable, my drinking was recreational, most of the time. And the whole Forsythe's doppelganger is out there somewhere doing God knows what thing. Yeah, we don't talk about that. Counterproductive. Bad for mental health. Not worth the headache. Besides, I had my hands full tonight. Like, really full. Dr. Frederick was pressed against my couch, his fingers tangled in my hair, and his mouth, Jesus Christ. It had started as a harmless nightcap, a professional welcome for the new German transplant expert in the department. But Frederick wasn't just any doctor. He was 6'3", built like a Greek sculpture, and had a jawline so sharp it could probably cut through surgical tape. And as it turned out, he also wasn't looking for anything serious, which made this perfect. Our first hookup, and it was already intense as hell. Clothes barely hanging on, hands everywhere, my back hitting the couch as he kissed down my neck, lips trailing lower. Bang, bang, bang! I froze. More pounding, this time rattling the damn door off its hinges. What the hell? It was nearly midnight. Frederick groaned, still catching his breath. You are expecting someone? Nope, I muttered, already standing, already annoyed. Whoever it was better have a damn good reason for interrupting me, or I was about to commit a crime. The banging didn't stop. I stormed downstairs, muttering every curse word in existence. Whoever was at the door was about to get a lecture they wouldn't soon forget. Yanking it open, I started, "Do you have any idea?" And then I froze. Julio. He was barely standing. His face was a mess. Bruised cheekbone, split lip, blood crusting along his eyebrow. His jacket was torn, dirt smeared across his knuckles like he'd just gone 10 rounds with a freight train and lost. My stomach lurched. What the hell? Behind me, Frederick appeared at the top of the stairs, shirtless, his hair a disheveled mess. Who is this? Julio wobbled on his feet. No. Hospitals. And then his knees buckled. I barely caught him before he hit the ground. Julio? Hey, shit! I knelt, frantically patting his face, checking his pulse. Still strong, but his skin was clammy, and his breathing was all wrong. Too shallow, too unsteady. From above, Frederick sighed, running a hand down his face. This is weird as hell. I ignored him, trying to haul Julio up. Frederick scoffed. You know what? Have fun with this. He grabbed his coat, yanked open the door, and muttered, "Unbelievable," before disappearing into the night. I didn't care. Julio was unconscious in my arms, and that was a much bigger problem. 3 days later, Julio was stable. Bruised, bandaged, but stable. Apparently, he'd gotten into a bar fight that went south, which, yeah, shocking. Who could have guessed that the guy in a leather jacket with a permanent scowl had a tendency to piss people off? Now he was recovering in my guest room, and I was in the kitchen, making breakfast because, well, I had to do something other than hover like an overbearing mother. I was flipping an omelet when movement from the hallway caught my eye. Julio, hobbling out of the bedroom. I nearly dropped the pan. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" Julio held up a hand, grimacing as he leaned against the counter. "Don't worry, amigo. I'm already much better." "Yeah, you look great. Real picture of health," I deadpanned, eyeing the way he winced just breathing. He exhaled, shaking his head. "I appreciate everything, really, but I cannot inconvenience you any further." "Oh yeah? Watch me be inconvenienced." I placed my hands on his shoulders, solid, warm, stubborn as hell, and steered him toward the nearest chair. "Sit, eat, then we talk." He sighed but let me guide him, muttering something in Spanish that I was pretty sure translated to, "This gringo is impossible." I plated the omelets, set down some toast, and slid a cup of coffee in front of him. We ate in silence for a while, him slow and careful, me trying not to stare at the way his fingers curled around the mug. How different he looked now. Less angry, more tired. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Listen, I owe you an apology." Julio raised an eyebrow. "For?" I swallowed. "For stalking you." He snorted. "Yeah, I figured. I swear I'm not a lunatic." He looked unconvinced. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. You look like someone I knew." Julio studied me for a moment, then reached for his jacket slung over the back of the chair. He pulled out his wallet, flicked it open, and slid his ID across the table. Navarro, I read. His full name, his birth date, a little holographic emblem proving he wasn't an imposter. "Born and raised in Spain," he said simply, his gaze steady. I exhaled, feeling something unclench in my chest. "Right. Okay." Julio watched me for another long beat. Then with a sigh, he leaned back. "I am sorry too, for throwing you out of the bar." I waved him off. Stranger things have happened. Julio smirked. "Stranger things? Like you playing doctor for a criminal?" I rolled my eyes. "You're not a criminal, just an idiot with bad decision-making skills." He chuckled, wincing slightly. I frowned. "Speaking of, which if you're so against hospitals, you should stick around for a bit. Make sure those injuries don't get infected." Julio raised an eyebrow. "And you will personally ensure that?" "Damn right." I crossed my arms. "Unless you'd rather go another round with whoever rearranged your face." Julio smirked, shaking his head. "You are very persistent. You have no idea." 2 weeks later. If you'd told me 2 weeks ago that I'd have a roommate, scratch that, a voluntary roommate, I would have laughed in your face. But here we were, and it wasn't all what I'd expected. Julio and I had gotten to know each other. Like, really know each other. And now, when I looked at him, I no longer saw Forsythe. Sure, the resemblance was still there. The sharp cheekbones, the way his green eyes darkened when he was thinking too hard. But that was where the similarities ended. Julio was rough around the edges, all leather and sharp words. But underneath, he was deeply emotional. Not that he'd ever admit it, but I saw it in the way he talked about his crew, his home, the past he kept close to his chest. Somehow we'd grown on each other. And then a few days ago, it happened. We kissed. Not the whiskey-fueled bad decision kind of kiss. Not the I want to screw you just for the hell of it kiss. A real one. It had weight. Affection. and that terrified me. Since Julio had been around, I hadn't felt the need to distract myself. The endless bar crawls, the reckless flings, it all seemed so self-destructive in hindsight. Looking in from the outside, I saw how much of a mess I'd been. But tonight, I wasn't thinking about all that. I was thinking about dinner. I stepped out of the cab, grocery bags in hand, already running through the options. Maybe eggnog and waffles? Yeah, why not? I unlocked the door, kicking it shut behind me. Julio, what do you think about eggnog and... Silence. I froze. The apartment was eerily still. A prickle of unease crawled up my spine. I set the groceries down and hurried upstairs, my mind immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios. I pushed open the bedroom door and stopped cold. Julio sat on the edge of my bed, head in his hands. Beside him, my chest tightened. A photo album. That photo album. The one filled with Forsythe. With us. My stomach dropped. He must have felt my presence because his fingers curled into his hair, his breathing heavy. Julio's hands shook. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. What the hell is this? His voice was low, dangerous. I swallowed hard, stepping closer. Julio, I gestured weakly at the album, at the pictures of him, of Forsythe. This is what I was trying to tell you. The Forsythe I don't give a shit. His voice cut through the room like a blade. I flinched. He shot to his feet, knocking the album off the bed. Photos spilled onto the floor. Laughing Forsythe, smiling Forsythe, my Forsythe, surrounding Julio like ghosts. His hands curled into fists at his sides. His breath was heavy, ragged. You don't want me. You just want a damn ghost. That's not... I don't care who Forsythe was, he snapped. I'll never be him. I opened my mouth, closed it. Because what the hell was I supposed to say to that? Julio scoffed, running a hand down his face. He looked tired, drained in a way that made my chest ache. Then, without another word, he turned, walked out. The front door slammed behind him, rattling through my bones. I stood there, staring at the empty space he left behind. And for the first time since Forsythe died, I realized I wasn't grieving him anymore. I was grieving Julio. 2 weeks later. If there was a god, he was definitely messing with me. 2 weeks. 14 days of pretending Julio storming out hadn't left a crater in my chest. And the worst part? I couldn't even drown it in booze and bad decisions anymore. That part of me, the reckless, self-destructive part, packed its bags the moment Julio stepped into my life. And now, I had nothing to fall back on. Just my thoughts. And my thoughts sucked. At first, yeah, it was the resemblance. It had to be. The sheer impossibility of it. Seeing Forsythe's face on a man with a different life, a different attitude, it messed me up. Like some kind of cosmic joke at my expense. But then, that shock faded. And Julio, he wasn't some Forsythe 2.0. He was Julio. Brash, unpredictable, cocky as hell. But with this quiet, frustrating softness underneath. The kind that sneaks up on you. The kind that stays. And I had fallen for him. Hard. I tried calling. Once, twice, 5 times. Nothing. Not that I expected anything else. And I wasn't about to go looking for him again. Meeting Julio was like getting struck by lightning twice. There wasn't gonna be a third time. So I made my decision. I was leaving Spain at the end of the month. I had come here to escape Forsythe's memory, and somehow I had ended up colliding with it instead. It was time to really move on. That's why I was back at the bar tonight. Not for the god-awful drinks. Not to pick up some stranger and pretend for a few hours. Just to soak it all in. This was where I had met Julio, after all. I drained my glass, threw a few bills on the counter, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. And that's when I saw him. Standing just outside, arms crossed, waiting. Julio. I schooled my face, forced my body not to react. Julio wasn't waiting for me. He was probably out here meeting someone else. Someone who hadn't royally screwed him over. So I said a quick hey and moved to walk past him. "Wait," he said. I froze, back ramrod straight. My brain naturally short-circuited and immediately filled the silence by making me talk. Way too much. Look, I didn't come here looking for you or anything. I just wanted a drink. One last time, that's all. Julio's brows furrowed. One last time? I nodded, forcing a casual shrug. Yeah, I've caused enough trouble. I'm heading back to the States at the end of the month. Something flickered across his face. Something brief. Something I almost missed. Oh. It was a simple response, but there was weight behind it. And just as quickly, he masked it, rolling his shoulders like it didn't matter. Then we should drink. I blinked. What? Julio smirked. If you are leaving, then you and I are having drinks. Tonight. Unless, of course, you are too much of a coward. I scoffed, crossing my arms. Please, I can outdrink you. He grinned, and just like that, we were back inside. At Julio's signal, the bartender poured, filling both glasses to the brim. We drank. 1 glass, 2, 3. Silence hung between us, thick and heavy. Finally, I caved. I'm sorry, I said, staring at my drink. Julio let out a dry chuckle. For what? For the whole Forsythe thing. Julio exhaled, muttering something sharp in Spanish, then drained his glass. You don't owe me an apology, he said, setting it down with a soft clink. You don't owe me anything. I opened my mouth, but he cut me off with a raised hand. I had no reason to be mad. I had no right to be mad. He continued, voice calmer now. Your life before me is your life. Your past is your past. After a beat, Julio pushed back from the counter and stood. Come, he said. Walk with me. I didn't even think. Just nodded dumbly, tossed a few bills on the bar, and followed him out into the night. 30 minutes later. Turns out Julio's idea of a walk was actually a full-speed death wish of a bike ride through the city. Romantic, right? I clung to him as my life depended on it. Which, let's be honest, it did. Arms locked around his waist as he weaved through tight alleys, dodged stray dogs, and ignored every traffic law known to man. The city blurred past us, neon and chaos. But Julio? He was steady. Sure. Completely in his element. About 30 minutes later, we rolled to a stop at the very edge of town. It wasn't some picture-perfect viewpoint. No, Julio had brought me to a hill overlooking the slums, the place where he grew up. Below, the streets were narrow, crowded, pulsing with life in a way the rest of the city wasn't. It was his world. Julio killed the engine and walked over to the rails, leaning on it and looking down at the streets. After making sure the railings could support both our weights, I joined him at the edge, gazing at the lights below. Seeing that photo album messed me up, he admitted, voice lower than usual. Seeing his face, my face, living this perfect life. He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. It fucked me up, because I've never had that. I fought for everything, and for a second I thought, maybe I wasn't enough. I stayed quiet, let him talk. Julio ran a hand through his hair, his frustration spilling over. And then I found out who he really was. Your fiancé. He scoffed, shaking his head. It sucked, man. Thinking I was just some placeholder? Some cheap knockoff? He glanced at me, eyes dark, searching. I saw your life together. He was successful, loved, and me? Mierda. I looked at myself and thought, how the hell do I compare to that? And just like that, it clicked. Julio hadn't been running from me. He'd been running from what he thought he could never be. I turned to him, meeting his gaze head on. Forsythe seemed like an amazing guy, Julio admitted. But I can never replace him. You don't have to, I said, voice firm. Julio blinked, thrown off. Because he doesn't need to be replaced. His jaw clenched like he didn't quite believe me yet. Like he was waiting for the but. I've had a lot of time to think, I went on. And I can say for certain, I'm not pining after Forsythe. I was there when he died, Julio. I saw his last moments. And yeah, it wrecked me. But it took time and I made peace with it. Julio swallowed hard. His hands curled into fists against his thighs. I exhaled, steadying myself. You looking like Forsythe? It threw me off. It caught me so off guard that I didn't know how to react. Then I met his eyes, really looked at him. But these feelings, what I've been feeling these last few months, they're for you, Julio Navarro, not Forsythe. His breath hitched. Silence stretched between us, thick with everything unsaid. Then after what felt like a lifetime, Julio let out a shaky breath and chuckled, soft, disbelieving. My God, he muttered. And just like that, I knew. This time, he wasn't going to run. 1 week later, I woke up to the smell of coffee and pancakes, which was already a solid start to my morning. Instinctively, I reached for the pain meds on my nightstand, muscle memory at this point. But halfway through, I stopped. I didn't need them. Progress. Dragging on a robe, I padded downstairs, following the scent of breakfast. And there he was, Julio standing at the stove, flipping pancakes like he was born to do it. His hair was loose, a little messy, and his leather jacket was draped over a chair. The sight of him in my kitchen, cooking breakfast like he belonged here, did something weird to my chest. I cleared my throat. Smells amazing. Julio smirked, barely sparing me a glance. Of course it does, he said smoothly, plating up a stack. I slid into a chair as he placed the plate in front of me, already drizzling syrup over my pancakes, like he knew I'd be too lazy to do it myself. As I ate, I let myself sink into the moment. Julio and I had spent the last couple of weeks just being. No more running, no more ghosts, just us. But my flight was only a few days away now. I wasn't leaving for good. I'd be back after a week, but still. I couldn't shake the feeling that once I got on that plane, all of this might disappear. Julio must have noticed because he suddenly pointed his fork at me. ¿Por qué la cara larga? I blinked. What? The long face, he clarified, tilting his head. You're coming back, right? This trip to the States, it's good for you. I exhaled, pushing my half-eaten pancakes around the plate. Yeah, I know I'm coming back. And yeah, it'll probably be good for me. But I can't help feeling like... I hesitated. Like maybe this is all just some elaborate fever dream. And once I leave, it'll be gone. Julio hummed, considering. He got up, dropped his dish in the sink, then came back and perched on the edge of the table next to me, watching me closely. And then casually, too casually, he asked, So, do you really intend on coming back? I shot up so fast that my chair nearly hit the floor. That's not even a question. Julio's smirk deepened, lazy and knowing. Then without warning, he grabbed me by the waist and pulled me in. Bueno, he murmured, his voice rough at the edges. Then I'll be here, waiting. And just like that, His lips were on mine. The kiss was slow at first, deliberate, safe, like he was testing the waters, waiting for me to sink. But then I pulled him closer, fingers sliding into his hair, and that was all the encouragement he needed. His grip on my waist tightened as he deepened the kiss, his tongue teasing against mine, hot and consuming. I melted into him, my hands skimming over his back, feeling every muscle shift under my touch. Then he moved, lips trailing along my jaw, my neck. He sucked slightly on a spot just beneath my ear, and a strangled sound escaped my throat. Fuck. Julio chuckled against my skin, breath hot, teasing. Then with one swift motion, he turned and cleared the table with a single sweep of his arm, plates and silverware clattering to the floor. Before I could even react, he gripped my hips and lifted me onto the edge of the now empty table, stepping between my legs. I barely had time to catch my breath before his lips found mine again, hungrier this time, his hands gripping my thighs, keeping me locked against him. My robe loosened as his fingers ghosted over my chest, his mouth leaving a scorching path from my jaw to my collarbone, down to the crevice of my chest, then lower still, grazing the faint ridges of my abs. He paused, looking up at me, green eyes burning. My breath hitched. "Why'd you stop?" I murmured, swallowing hard. "What's wrong?" Julio exhaled a quiet chuckle, pressing a kiss just above my navel. "Nada," he murmured. "I just wanted to let you know that I'll be here when you get back." And then his head dipped lower, while I threw mine back in raw ecstasy. Conclusion. Remember that flight I was supposed to get on? The one back to the States? Yeah, that never happened. Julio and I got so caught up in each other, talking, laughing, existing, that when the time came to pack my bags, I just didn't. And just like that, Spain became home. We didn't rush things. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic confessions, no running through an airport to stop me before I boarded. We just were. We took our time figuring out what this was, what we were. Julio was still Julio, gruff and unpredictable, but with me, he softened in a way I don't think he even noticed. And me? I stopped looking for distractions. I didn't need them anymore. A year passed before he finally popped the big question. And no, not that question. Neither of us were itching to get hitched. Not yet, anyway. No. Julio's big question? "Move in with me, idiota." To which obviously I said yes. And that was it. No over-the-top romance movie ending. No big life-altering moment. Just me and Julio figuring it out, one day at a time. The end. Have you ever had a run-in with a doppelganger or a lookalike of someone you know? Let me know all about it in the comments below. Meanwhile, take a page out of my and Julio's book and join our Rainbow Force. Together, we can unapologetically be ourselves.